name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, ProcureTech leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way that we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting an accomplished international executive with expertise in operations management, specializing in supply chain, purchasing, multi-country transformation, and change. He brings with him today experience from over 30 years from organizations such as Rolls Royce, Phillips, T-Mobile, Vodafone, Atos, and many other multinational corporations. Currently Chief Procurement Officer at Kantar, Stephen Day. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. When you make an introduction like that, it sounds quite good. So I hope whatever content comes from me justifies the introduction you just given me.
I have to ask, is there a business that you haven't worked at?
Sometimes a long list of companies isn't necessarily something that you can take a lot of credit for, because it might be a track record of disaster. But no, you pretty much got the list, and I've been very fortunate. I think pretty much all of those companies have really been in the telecoms, media, technology space. So that's really kind of my hinterland, I suppose.
Being someone that specializes in supply chain and purchasing, what exactly does sourcing and procurement mean to you?
Well, it's really if you think of most businesses, everybody is buying something from somebody, transforming what they do, and then sending it and then selling it to somebody at a higher margin than what they purchase those services into. So really, very, very basically for me, it's really the process of just transforming things that you buy into things that have extra value that you hope to sell to somebody else.
Do you think that procurement and sourcing is always, how would I say, valued in the business as a value adder?
You talk to loads of procurement people, they always say, oh, I want to be top of the table. I want to be
Right.
reporting into the CEO. I want to be at the top table. I always say to those people, be careful what you wish for, because the closer you get to the smoke, the more inclined you are to get burnt. So I think invariably through the course of my career, I think people definitely see the importance of procurement and supply chain. And I think it's really down to the leader of those functions to really demonstrate its prominence in the businesses that they work in.
As a leader in that function, do you feel as if you've maybe not cracked the nut, but do you have any specific tips that you would provide to anyone else that's starting out in a leadership position to, for example, be able to seen as a role player that has real
Yeah.
influence within the broader value chain?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Firstly, make sure that you network ferociously. So, often people think networking is about networking externally and building up your network there. I would argue that those same skills apply internally as well. So you've got to be really, really adept at building a kind of network of people within the business. Some of them, by the way, may not be functionally related to the things that you do, but getting the message out of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to affect, you require quite a lot of grassroots support to make that happen. So that's really, really important, I think. The second thing is, and again, I'm not sure this is remarkable. I'm sure lots of people do this, but also make sure that the strategy and the narrative that you build is really linked to the strategy and the purpose of the business at the top of house. So you always think about that elevator pitch, and when you get into
Right.
the lift or the elevator and you're talking to the CEO and he says, what you're doing, never talk about the minutiae of procurement. Always talk about what you're doing as it relates to the strategy that he or she, I should say, has articulated. I think they're the things that you've got to get right.
It's a fantastic tip. I don't think that it's minute in any way, shape, or form. I think that it's all too often overlooked to be able to ensure that procurement has a leader that is able to lead with a vision right? And
Yeah.
that vision is not just talking about the transactional aspects of procurement, but
Yeah. Yeah.
rather the value adding aspects, and a leader that's willing to take advantage of what is available to them. I think about a customer of ours at BT Sourced and Cito Pura, and what he's been able to do with breaking out BT Sourced, and I think that those are two main pillars in his success as well, and their success as an organization, and great tips to anyone getting started out. What exactly made you decide to work in procurement? I mean, did you choose the role, or did it choose you?
No, well, again, I don't know if. Very simply, people, Brits might tell from my accent, I'm from the Midlands, so the kind of middle of the country. And I was 15, struggling at school, and the school that I attended had the opportunity for students at the time to go and spend a week in industry. I was 15 at the time,
Mm,
struggling at school. Didn't really know what I was going to do. My parents had divorced. My dad was an alcoholic. So lots of strife going on there, and what simply happened was I spent a week at Rolls Royce Aerospace at the time. This is in don't want to give my age away, but if people look at me on LinkedIn, you'll have a clue. So it's kind of the mid-80s, and I was just fascinated. The smell of the factory, the
mm,
conversations that people were having. It was all about materials management in the day. That was the phrase that people used to describe supply chain, and it just hooked me there and then. You used to go for lunch every day, and you went. I mean, again, I'm giving my age away a little bit, but it was in the day where you had restaurants for directors, where you had silver service, and all these
mm,
kind of things. I just thought, oh my goodness me, I would really love a piece of this, and it kind of gave me a bit of impetus. In England, you have A levels and O levels, and I kind of muddled my way through those, and then got
mm,
onto a degree course, and then Rolls Royce came back and they offered me um, um, a graduate placement after I finished my degree. So I always have a real positive thought about Rolls Royce Aerospace because they gave me the opportunity to see what was possible, and then they gave me the opportunity to get my career going. And so I'm one of these people that wanted to get into procurement from the get go. Sometimes you hear people say they stumbled into it or they didn't know what it was about, but no,
right.
I wanted to go straight away.
That's amazing. A great story. Thanks for being so vulnerable as well and sharing. And for us, the way we source, we started this because we're interested in the impact that procurement and sourcing play in the way that we live, right? That's what we say.
Yeah,
It's so fantastic when procurement and sourcing gets so material, right? When you're able to see, feel, smell the things that are
yeah,
produced in
yeah.
this world. I think that that's one of the unique insights that you're able to have working in supply chain and procurement. Uh, in your current role at Kantar, I'm sure that it's differed from your previous sourcing roles at businesses that you've worked within. Um, how exactly does it differ?
Yeah, well, firstly, for just so you know what Kantar does, it's a
Please.
data analytics market research company. So we kind of have three parts of our business. The first part is insights. So we provide the biggest FMCG brands in the world insights about what people think about their products and services. We then provide longitudinal data. That's to say that how are consumers buying products and services, what kind of grocery market share do certain brands have, what's the price points, all that kind of stuff. That's what we call our world panel business. A third business that we have is called media. I have a smile on my face as I'm talking to you because I have quite a good story about that. So this is basically a business that measures um, audience habits in terms of historically linear TV. So wherever you are in the world, there's normally a federation of advertisers and broadcasters. And what Kantar does in some of those countries around the world is measure what people are watching
Mm,
by their demographic. And that's incredibly valuable because, so for example, I mean, Love Island, I'm sure that's a TV show that most people will know around the world. There's all kind of different European versions of that. I'm sure, the advertisements that go into those segments will be linked to the audience that's watching it. So no surprise, it will be about ASOS is an online brand in England. Boohoo, that they advertise in those slots, holidays and things like that. Me, on the other hand, I'll get funeral plans, retirement homes, Alzheimer's medication, and what's happening there is basically the TV slots have been sold to particular target audiences, and the advertisers are going in. So that's our media business. But by and large, the Kantar supply chain is services. It's not things. It's not bits of kit or a lot of overseas sourcing. So we're really buying people and people expertise, and it's a really interesting area because, like all of us, that's an area of cost that has inflated massively over the course of the past couple of years. But also, I would add that the controls and the frameworks by which people want to know what that supply chain looked like is increasing. Modern slavery, sanctions, and making sure you're using companies that are in appropriate countries, making sure those companies have the right infrastructure and cybersecurity and all that kind of stuff. So very interesting, less about the mechanical bits, but more about the services bit.
Super interesting, and I think that it's a bit of a I think that you're putting service procurement on a pedestal right now, which you should be doing as well, because it is an increasingly tough situation, not just when you're buying raw materials or products or but also services, based upon the current geopolitical shifts that we've seen, but also aspects, as you mentioned, related to cybersecurity, super important. But I think also sometimes, how would I say, devalued in an organization, unfortunately, whether that's listed as to be indirect procurement. Obviously, in your business, it is direct procurement when it comes to services, but nonetheless, an interesting insight. You have the rather unique perspective that I believe one can really only gain with time and experience. Sorry, again, not to give away your age there, Steven, but I mean, have you seen procurement technology shift since you started your career in procurement to where it is today?
Massively. I mean, it just unimaginably so. I mean, when I was working for Rolls Royce, they implemented a new ERP system which they built themselves, and they called it Merlin at the time. And for those of you who know, Merlin was a famous engine that Rolls Royce used to manufacture. So that was what I saw at the beginning of my career. Where I am right now, I doubt there are any companies now that are building their own ERP systems.
Right.
What they're taking broadly is a product set from a whole raft of vendors out there that really productized the whole ERP, MRP sourcing approach. And I think that's to the good because, I think the challenge is kind of time to value these days. So deploying these capabilities and this rich technology in such a way that you can try and unlock and drive those business benefits a lot faster. A lot of time, as things have evolved, what was happening is you're spending an awful lot of time trying to get the technology to settle, get the technology to work, and you weren't spending any time on business change or getting your data right. And I think that has really shifted now. So you should be spending less time on the technology and much more time on the data and the business change.
That's a good point. What's one thing that you now know today about procurement technology, maybe that you wish that you knew 15 to 20 years ago? Because obviously being able to spend more time on the data and the actual change management rather than, the IT, that wasn't really maybe necessarily possible 15 to 20 years ago either, because the market wasn't there. But what's maybe one thing that you know today that you wish you knew, maybe about 20 years ago?
Well, that's a great question. And I would say that, when I was kind of in the early stage of my career, I thought kind of the procurement operations, the procurement technology, I would relegate, because where all the action and the real power and the strategy was here, all in the strategic sourcing and getting the deals right, and that was what you used to kind of high five and celebrate about. What I've seen, and this is very relevant in Kantar, is that you can do the best deals in the world, but if you don't get your procurement technology right, so that kind of requisition through to payment to the supplier, if you don't get that right, then the value that you deliver through the category will never get delivered to the bottom line of the business. So actually, I'm now beginning to think that strategic sourcing has to go in line with procurement technology, so that you drive end-to-end transformation. And I can think of a couple of examples in my career that, if I'd known that and been a bit more aware of that at the time, probably could have driven a lot bigger benefits than I was able to do at the time. So that's probably my biggest learning.
Super good insights. Having systems is one thing, like we've talked about. Leveraging them is another. How do
Yeah.
you believe that you, as a leader, for example, can best encourage and ensure that a procurement org adopts new technology? But also, as a second fold to that question, do you think that a team needs, required specificity within their competencies or the function?
Yeah. Again, great question. I mean, I was to some degree, I was lucky at Kantar because we didn't have any procurement technology and we didn't have a procurement team. So it wasn't like I had to convert anybody to think about doing things in a different way. But what I did
Right.
recognize very early on is that, like all change, there's always this thing about how you can install some institutional memory into the organization so that using the capabilities that you're deploying becomes second nature. And again, hopefully there's lots of people listening to this will also understand that, it's not like you've got an army of people interacting with the procurement system all the time. If you do it right, you should really have the business interacting with the procurement technology. And what you've
Right.
done is set up all of the categories, and you've got procurement operations in the background. So that's a bit of a nuance there, but hopefully people will understand the point that I'm making. So what we've done at Kantar to really make sure that we build institutional knowledge is that we've created a shared service centre in Porto, in Portugal. And that's where we're running. We've deployed Cooper. As I talk to you, it's now live in several markets. By October, it will be live in 75% of Kantar's worldwide spend, which is quite an
Oh, congrats. Yeah,
accomplishment.
that's big
Yeah,
accomplishment.
and we've built a buy desk team there. We've built a knowledge center there, which is running change management and training. We've run a configuration and help desk team, and again, I think it's really important that. To my earlier point about how I think if you are really serious about procurement transformation, you've got to link together the category strategy with the procurement tech. I think what you've also got to do is make sure, as it relates to this particular topic we're discussing, make sure that you link your organization together as well, so that the category managers have some skin in the game in terms of operationally how those categories come to life in the procurement system that you've put in place. So, for example, over 70% of our spend in Kantar is now being sourced through what we call buying channels. So these are catalogs, buying forms, punch out catalogs, and things like that. And again, that's because I've been quite insistent with the category managers that they can't just go off and crack the deal. They've got to have some skin
Yeah.
in the game in terms of thinking about how we're going to operationalize it.
Well, something that's shifted, right? I mean, if you look at where the marketing and sales insight and tooling has come. I mean, you just said it yourself. What Kantar is doing yourself as a business is feeding insights to business to be able to sell and market their services in a more efficient
Yeah,
manner, right? And marketing and sales teams for the last 15, 20 years have had increasing technology, increasing third party insights. So the sales team is coming to the table with more insight, right? So strategic sourcing is less left at a grave disadvantage if they are not going to take advantage of the technology that is, relevant or relatively available to them out on the market or
Yeah,
currently in the business, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's the fact of today, and I think that the elements that you've talked about, how you rally your team, is super important for any leaders out there that are listening. And you also mentioned that Kantar, you came into a position where things were starting fresh. And some of our discovery discussions, I know that you and the Kantar team have already done some really impressive things in a short period of time. But could you detail the experience of walking into a new business, and there's nothing in place to where you are today?
I mean that's the Kantar story, and I suppose what listeners might be interested to know is that I joined in April the 6th, 2020, which was slapped down in the middle. That was the second week of the lockdown in the UK. So and a kind of laptop arrives in the post, and that was pretty much my
Right.
onboarding experience. So, gosh, it was hairy times, if I'm really honest
Mm,
with you, and. But on the one hand, a challenge, but also an opportunity. The opportunity was because normally when you join a business, you have to go on the road, you have to go around and meet everybody, and I think everybody knows that's really time consuming and all that kind of stuff. Well, lo and behold, because you couldn't travel, that meant that I had to kind of, to my point about networking, just get out there and start meeting the business leaders virtually.
mm,
And lo and behold, in 4 weeks, you've met a raft of business leaders that ordinarily might take you several months to do. So that was definitely a positive.
yeah. Wow.
Um, our owners, Bain Capital, had done some pre-assessment about the size of the opportunity as it related to the procurement transformation. So I had a bit of a head start there in terms of where to go. And I must add that Bain Capital and the leadership in Kantar kind of gave me the investment dollars to build the procurement team and then deploy the Cooper capabilities. So, you know, um, I kind of look back on that and think quite an unusual period in my career. I've often worked in companies where you know so much emphasis on networking and building relationships
Yeah.
before you can get going on the transformation, and then when you do want to get through the transformation, you kind of end up having these kind of horrible debates about investment dollars and size of the opportunity. But I think I was in very early on in the stage of Bain owning the company, and there's normally a window by which they own assets, and being in early gives you quite a runway to get in with your investment hypothesis early and start delivering that transformation.
Great insights. And I mean, you're there, April 2020, right? You start a CPO in the height of COVID. It means that you not only have to onboard yourself, in a remote context, but you need to build and upskill a team in a
Yeah,
remote context.
yeah,
You need to
yeah.
build a vision. You need to build a culture surrounding procurement in a remote context. How did you do this? What are your biggest learnings from this?
Yeah, well, there was so there's two steps in the process actually. So the first one was I needed to kind of recruit my leadership team,
Right.
and there were a combination of good folks that I took from the business and some folks that we hired externally. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing I said to the guys that I hired is, look, if we think about what we want to do, we want to build enduring business relationships with colleagues in Kantar. We do want to be a diverse and inclusive organization. We want to be
Mm,
an organization that has a growth mindset, and the growth mindset in my world and how I frame it is about learning, about taking risks, about improving and challenging ourselves. And then the fourth thing was, being quite deliberate in terms of great business outcomes.
mm,
And what I really wanted to avoid is, there would have been the Steve Day black book of people that I've worked with in my career that have
right.
done great work. And kind of realized that if I lent on that too much, what would happen is that I would be not really meeting the kind of diverse and inclusive bit of the organization that I wanted to build. So what we agreed as a leadership team is, what's the criteria that we're looking for? And then what I got my guys to do was actually recruit and pair with each other the various capabilities that they needed. So I didn't really get involved in the recruitment of the category managers that we recruit into the business. I let my guys do that, and it's worked brilliantly. We've been able to bring on board some really super talent. We've had some wobbles along the way. It's not been easy. We've had people that have joined, either figured out it's not the kind of the PE experience and our relative level of immaturity at the time. It's not for them, and they've gone. We've had some great talent that has been able to go on and do even better things. What we've made a point of doing is always celebrating the contributions that people have made, even though they may not have stayed with us as long as we might have hoped, or we might be disappointed that we're going, because I think that's also important as well, right?
Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt you while you're on a roll, but that is a fantastic way to look at the world, simply, Steve. And so thank you for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
If anyone takes anything from this episode, just go back 20 seconds and listen to what Steve just said there for a clip. I mean, that is the way that you should be looking at the world, seriously,
I
right?
yeah, and look, I wish and I'll be honest with you, I wish I'd looked at the world like that a lot earlier on in my career as well.
Mm,
I think, you know, there's been so many junctures in my career, really poignant points that taught me a lot of things. One was I worked for T-Mobile, delivered brilliant results in the supply chain transformation. We did
yeah.
an employee engagement survey. Everybody hated my guts. I thought I was like the new messiah. And what, and what did they say is, you don't give us time to breathe. You're not letting us
Mm,
grow. Mistakes are things that we're not learning from, and all that kind of stuff. And those type of lessons I took into my career. So I kind of do encourage people to learn and express themselves.
mm.
I have absolutely no problem with people saying they disagree with me, or they've got a different point of view. In fact, I encourage that more. And then just celebrating working with great people. I spoke
And
to
it
someone
sounds
last week.
like letting them be autonomous as well. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's the other thing. I think, and people are demanding it as well these days, and I
Mm,
often say to my guys, honestly, I think I've got people that are better negotiators than me in the team,
mm,
as it should be. You don't
mm.
need to be
Yep.
the brilliant at everything that you do.
Yeah, I think it was Zuckerberg that said hire people that are better than you, right?
Yeah,
As many experience though, like getting down to brass tacks of what it means to come into an organization. There's no procurement organization in place, right? Uh, there's a lot of maverick spend. There's going to be a number of redundant suppliers, and these can be two very large challenges whenever you're kind of building a central new function for procurement, right?
yeah.
And I'm sure that it's challenges that you met. Where did you and your team start when it came to these particular items?
Yeah, so we really two parts to that story. The first one is, so by the way, you can get, when you join a business, one of the things you really need to avoid is getting bent out of shape, that everything isn't going very well. Got to
Right.
remind yourself is that Kantar was a very successful company long before Steve Day joined, and Steve's role is to make it an even better company. So you have to be careful that you don't start calling out that it's a disaster, nothing's under control, and all those kind of things. May not be as good as you think it should be, but the truth of the matter is the business was doing pretty well before I arrived. But what we did was we did kind of two things. We broke out the opportunity assessment at the category level. So we went through the spend and said, looked at where we understood where the contracts were, worked with the business and said, what are the opportunities that we can go after and begin to start strategically sourcing, looking to put in the best deals, try and get the best prices. And then the
Mm,
second thing we did is we looked at the operational performance, so vendor numbers, AP terms, controls, risk assessment, and all those kind of things. So we really had kind of two transformations going on. One was the category transformation, and the other one was the operational procurement transformation. And the glue in the middle was the leadership team that linked those two things together to an earlier point that I made, so that you could drive the category transformation in unison operationally. So those values, the value that you created, definitely went through the organization.
really interesting. we've talked about it before on our episodes, but I'm curious, and because you hit yourself on the item of inclusivity and diversity within the procurement
Yeah.
organizations that you're looking to lead. Um, we Historically the industry is white men in blue suits, as I say, right? Uh, have you seen a shift in diversity, inclusion, and equity in supply chain teams? And also, do you believe that this has or will continue to result in more inclusive spend?
Gosh, that's a great question. It's definitely moving in the right direction. I think we could all
Mm,
debate whether it's moving quick enough. We've got a bit of an initiative going on where we do internships for schools in London, where we bring them into the office for a week and work with us and a number of partner companies, IBM, Hayes Recruitment, Officio, giving them a bit of an office experience, a procurement experience. We were trying to double it every year. So last year it was more than double it. So last year it was 5 students. This year we've done 26 students. Next year we want to do 50 students. The year after 100. We call it Intern London. Couldn't think of anything better to call it. Um, and what we're trying to do is just reach out into a community of incredible talent, enthusiasm, and energy. But the problem is these students don't have parents like my own children that are savvy on LinkedIn, have business connections,
right.
etc., etc. So what we're trying to do is just give them a version of what we do for our own children and get them to network, experience the office, see something like that. And for me, I really feel very strongly about that. I think about my own heritage and how roles just by pure luck, Rolls Royce gave me an experience, and I was able to see what my life could become from a procurement perspective. We're trying to do that for those students as well. So I think we've got to do more as a set of procurement practitioners. What we can't do is just moan the fact that there's not enough diverse talent out there. What I see a lot of companies do is fix it by saying, "Oh, well, we'll just increase our female talent count or the count from ethnic communities." I find that really, really lazy because what you're doing is you're just robbing people from one organization to another. You're not really increasing the pool of talent from those communities. So I think as professionals, we've got to do more outreach into the community and get the community to see what's available as a procurement profession.
A fantastic way to, in my opinion, round this off. It's amazing to hear that there are practitioners and leaders in the space that are doing the things that you and your team are doing at Kantar. It's been awesome having you on today, Stephen. Some super insights that you've been able to share about your experiences, also then your takes on what's going on in the world right now. Um, we want to then not only get to know Stephen Day, of course, the procurement professional, the chief procurement officer at Kantar, but we also want to get to know you a little bit more as a person, which you've definitely been vulnerable and shared quite a bit about today. But unrelated to any of the questions surrounding procurement or sourcing, we want to do a little quick fire round. We call it our Kodiak moment. Kodak that had kind of the camera company that went bust while they're still selling
Sure.
film, of course. But they had their Kodak moment, which was a special moment in time that they were able to only capture in a photo. And this is our special moment in time. All right. So simply put, a quick fire round, quick questions, quick answers from your side to be able to get to know Stephen Day, the man. All right.
Okay. Hopefully, it's not disappointing, the answers.
I don't think it will be. You have an all expenses paid vacation. You're leaving tomorrow. Where are you heading?
Bali,
All right. If you were purchasing an animal, a dog or a cat?
a dog,
We have a saying in Swedish, a paradrätt, which means that it's the dish that you are able to invite people over, you're going to make, and you know you're going to nail it and people are going to love it. What is your paradrätt that you would be inviting me over for dinner for?
wow, what a great question. My kids think I do an amazing spaghetti bolognese.
Do you do amazing spaghetti bolognese?
Well, I like it.
That's what's most important. One podcast or book that you could be able to recommend to our listeners right now.
Well, I'm a ferocious reader. If you want to go back in time, read a book called The Machine That Changed the World by Womack and Jones. And that is a book that was written by some people from MIT to try and get under the skin of why the Japanese car manufacturing industry was basically so superior to the American car industry in the 80s. And I think if you read that book, it will set the tone for what's happened to our supply chains over the past 30 years.
Wow. Super interesting. Great tip. Stephen, it's been a pleasure having you on. If anyone wants to reach out, get in touch, or understand more about what you're doing or what the team at Kantar is doing, how do they best do so?
Just drop me a line on LinkedIn, or my email address is Stephen with a PH .day@kantar.com. Always
Now you're going
happy
to get a
to.
lot. You're going to get a lot of sales emails after that, Stephen. I don't know if that was so
Touche,
smart.
yeah.
But nice to be able to have you on again. It's been a real pleasure. I think that we need more leaders like you. If you like today's episode, again, make sure to give it the program a rating, as well as then give us a follow. Stephen, amazing having you on. Thank you so much for your participation.
Cheers. Thank you.